Yesterday, we read about Yellowstone and how the government not only passed a law to keep it in its national state, but also created the National Park Service so it can be maintained properly. This week, we're diving into the government and learning about all the different responsibilities our government has. Today, we will read and gather evidence to help us understand the main idea of the text. The State Government and Its Citizens by Lisa Simone. In the United States, the national and state governments work together to help citizens. This system of shared powers is known as federalism. The 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution helps define how the two governments work together. James Madison, nicknamed the father of the Constitution, further explains this relationship in an essay published in The Federalist. The federal government cannot meet all the needs of all American citizens. So the Constitution says that each state is responsible for protecting the lives and liberties of its own citizens. Also, different states have different issues. For instance, water conservation is a big issue in California because of the severe drought there and its effects on the state's agriculture. In Wisconsin, protecting livestock is a major concern because dairy farming is a major industry in the state. Each state government responds to the specific needs of its citizens. Like the federal government, each state has its own constitution, which is a plan for the government. This constitution explains the structure, role, and work of the state government. In the United States, state governments are modeled after the federal government. However, most citizens have more contact with state and local governments than they do with the federal government. The state and local governments handle state and local police, schools, and libraries. The three branches of state government. No two state constitutions are exactly alike, but they are all the same in one way. Each constitution divides the state government into three branches or sections. They are the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. No one branch has more power than the other. By design, these different branches can keep the others from acting unfairly or gaining too much power. We call this system checks and balances. The state's legislative branch writes new laws and makes amendments or changes to old laws. This branch includes representatives and senators who are elected by voters. These serve for different lengths of time, depending on their state and its constitution. Each state-level legislator works like the federal-level legislative branch, the United States Congress. The state's executive branch carries out the laws passed by legislators. In state government, the governor, who is elected by popular vote, leads this branch. Other members of the executive branch include the governor's staff, the lieutenant governor, and the secretary of state. The governor sets a budget to decide how the state's money should be spent. The office of governor is similar to the office of president. Governors have a number of other responsibilities. A governor often attends important state events and ceremonies. She or he works to attract new businesses to the state by meeting with leaders from other states or countries. The governor also appoints officials to state agencies that work to improve life for their people of the state. State agencies oversee different areas, such as the economy or education. Finally, the judicial branch includes judges who interpret the laws of a state. In some states, voters elect judges. In other states, the governor appoints judges. State Supreme Courts focus on deciding if local laws and case decisions made in lower courts are fair and follow the state constitution. Wow, that was a lot of information about the state government and its citizens. I want to break it down and get some key details and find a main idea for each section that I'm reading so I can really understand it and dive deeper. When I first started reading this, I noticed the first few paragraphs were almost like the introduction of the article, The State Government and Its Citizens. I learned what the term federalism is, and that's when our nation and our state governments work together to help us, the citizens. We are citizens. So when everything is shared powers and they're working together, that's called federalism, and that's awesome. As I continued reading, I realized that each state is responsible for protecting the lives and liberties of its own citizens. So, the state of Illinois is responsible for all of us who live in Illinois. And then different states have different issues. And they give some examples. Like California, there's always a drought there, so that state has to really worry about water conservation. In Wisconsin, their main source of income is through their livestock, all the cows, and everything that produce the milk and cheese for Wisconsin. Yeah, that's super important. So they have to really focus in on that. I wonder what Illinois has to focus in on. As I continue reading the section, I realized that state governments are modeled after the federal government, so they're very similar. Most citizens have more contact with state and local government than they do with the federal. I totally understand that. I'm not having conversations with the president every other day, but I can have conversations with my governor every other day. They're closer, and they know the needs of me who lives in Illinois. So, from reading that introduction section, I find that the main idea off to the right here is that the state government works together to help and protect its citizens, and this is known as federalism. As I continued reading the article, I realized I have a new section now. There is a heading that says the 3 branches of state government. Sometimes I like to change my titles or headings into questions, so I'm going to change this one into a question just so I can understand what I'm about to read about. I'm going to change this question into, how do the 3 branches of government influence the way we live? That way, when I'm reading this, I can gather information about how they're influencing the way I live. I do know that there's 3 different branches, and I circled them at the bottom there. There's the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Can't wait to annotate what those 3 branches do and how they influence the way we live. Continuing on that section of the 3 branches of government, I realize I see first off they're talking about the legislative branch. So I circled legislative branch and I underlined a few things. They write new laws, and they make amendments or changes to old laws, and they include representatives and senators. So off to the side in that box, I just wrote a few in my own words. Write new laws, representatives, and senators. I also drew a line to the picture down below so I can kind of get a visual of what they do during meetings. It looks like there's a whole bunch of people talking to each other. So they must have to discuss different laws and how it affects Illinois. Then we jump into the executive branch. So I circled it and I underlined a few things too. I know the executive branch carries out the laws. The executive branch has the governor that leads the branch. He or she sets a budget, attracts new businesses, and appoints officials to state agencies that work to improve life for the people. Awesome. So in that box, I wrote a few things in my own words too. Carrying out the laws, the governor, and then underneath the governor, I kind of wrote what the governor does: budget, state agencies, new businesses. This last part, I want you to do. So our last paragraph, paragraph 9, talks about the judicial branch. On the next slide, you're going to be figuring out what does the judicial branch do, or who's a part of the judicial branch. Let's figure that out together. All right, it's your turn now to figure out the judicial branch. I want you to highlight the key details in paragraph 9, which is below. What does the judicial branch do for us? Make sure to use the highlighter tool. Finally, the judicial branch includes judges who interpret the laws of a state. In some states, voters elect judges. In other states, the governor appoints judges. State Supreme Courts focus on deciding if local laws and case decisions made in lower courts are fair and follow the state constitution. Use the highlighting tool to highlight the key details from paragraph 9. We are looking for who is in the judicial branch and what are they responsible for. As you can see from what we read today, the government does a lot of things for us. The executive branch has the governor, and he or she makes budgets, attracts new businesses, and appoints officials to different agencies to help the people of the state. The legislative branch includes legislators, which are representatives and senators. They are the people who write new laws to make sure its citizens are safe and protected. And lastly, you found that the judicial branch includes judges who interpret the laws and make sure they are fair and being followed. Tomorrow we will read more about how these branches affect the way we live in our